What's up, guys? It is very late Monday night, and I've just finished editing the Film Slice podcast, which goes up every Tuesday. This is kind of my Monday night ritual, and I still haven't filmed something today, so I figured I would give you a few tips and tricks of how to edit your podcast as fast as you can. I've been editing this podcast for just over a year now. Finesse my editing style in order to make it as quick and as efficient as possible. So I don't know how many we're going to get to. I think 10's like a good, nice round number. It's just kind of off the top of my head and just kind of coming from when I've been editing tonight. So first off, you want to kind of set yourself up for success. So when you're recording, even before you start editing, when you're recording, you really want to try and make sure that you're sticking to your parameters. So for us, we don't really want to have a podcast that's over half an hour. We think that half an hour is a sweet spot to kind of get what we want to say across. Anything more than that, then it's just kind of rambling and stuff like that. So when you're recording, we try and hit half an hour as much as we can. We've never actually hit half an hour. Generally, we record for about an hour, and then I cut it down. I cut out all of the inappropriate parts and all of the boring bits and stuff like that. So we've kind of just got the cream of the crop. So tip number one is record within your parameters. My second tip would be edit it in a software program that you're familiar with and you know the shortcuts to. So I record our podcast on GarageBand. GarageBand is great for what I need it for. I record 3 separate channels for the 3 separate voices in the room. And then that's pretty much all I do in GarageBand. So I'll export that, and then I'll take that full clip and I'll bring it into Final Cut Pro, which is my editor of choice. Just means that I'm more familiar with the keys and how to do everything. I know all the shortcuts on the keyboard and things like that as well, which just kind of saves you that little bit of time figuring out where to go and what to do and what to click and all that kind of jazz. Which leads me to my third point. The keys that I use most often are the scrubbing keys, so scrubbing forwards and scrubbing backwards. So problems that I have if you're editing in GarageBand or in an audio-based thing, more often than not, it's hard to find a fast forward button. I find for the podcast, if I'm editing an hour's worth of audio, I'm not going to sit there and listen to it in real time. Instead, for Final Cut, I'm just going to press the L key. If I press L once, it plays. If I press L twice, it plays in fast forward. So I can still make out what we're all saying, but I can just kind of scrub over the things that I need and don't need.
With my co-host Kane, and then images, and is now known as look.
So if you listen to it in double time, it just means that you're gonna have half as much time wasted on just listening to the content. Tip number 4 is learn to read sound waves. You're gonna see the audio files normally have a waveform, which is the volume of the track. Basically, if you know there's something that you want to cut out, or if there's something that doesn't quite fit into the rest of the podcast, if there's something that you want to cut out, basically you want to look at where it starts and where it finishes, and you can just cut that complete thing. So normally, especially if you've been recording podcasts for a while, if things don't work, normally it kind of peters out and you'll see a dip in the waveform. Cut that and boom, super easy. Tip number 5 is use the range tool. Seems trivial at the moment, but for me, I basically have my hand in one position, which is over the J, K, and L. So J is reverse, K is stop, L is forward. And then right above that, I've got in and out. So you use your in and out to highlight the strip that you want deleted. In, fast forward all the way to the next point in the waveform, because you know how to read waveforms. Hit O for out, and then just click delete. Okay, so tip number 6 is to put all of your stings into one section. So by stings, I mean, if you've got any intro music, outro music, if you've got segment pieces that you want to put in, all of that kind of stuff. It's really handy having them all in one area. So once I've put my waveform in, I just go straight to that folder and keep that folder open, and I know I've got my intro, my outro, my separate segments all there ready to go. So when I am up to that point in the WAV file, all I have to do is highlight up the top, the piece that I need, bring it down, drop it in, off you go again, and you've got the next one ready to go without having to do anything. Tip number 7 is make sure you put any effects that you need to put on your audio track right at the start before you start cutting into things. So right at the start, I bring it in and I make sure I put a compressor on it, level out any EQs, any of that kind of stuff. Do that before you start editing your timeline. Just means that everything's gonna be exactly the same instead of having to go back after you've cut it and then add each individual effect. Number 8 is make sure you have a good filing system to know exactly which podcast is which, what you're up to, all of that kind of jazz. So you'll see here I've got all of my episodes from episode 28, from episode 28 to 62, and they're all in order. So the way that I do it, I put FSP for Film Slice Podcast, episode, and then the episode name. Just means that I know exactly where they are. So if I do need to go back and find like a sound bit from yesterday's podcast or the other day's podcast, if I want to put that in, it's super easy to find out where it is because it's all in chronological order. This kind of goes into tip number 9, which is when you're uploading it to YouTube, it's always handy to have all the information that you need in your title. So not just the title of the actual podcast, but for me, the episode number, so that when I'm putting in the information into YouTube or into iTunes or anything like that, it's all there ready for me to go. I don't have to find bits and pieces. And tip number 10 is a bit of a cop-out, but I wanted to make it to 10. So tip number 10 is just practice. Practice makes perfect. When we first started the podcast, it probably would have taken me about 2 hours, two and a half hours. So saved about half an hour to an hour's worth of editing time just from practice, just knowing exactly what I need to do, what keys I need to press, all that kind of jazz. And these tips are kind of what helped me get through the edits really fast. If you guys edit a podcast and have a few different tips, I would love to know them. I would always love to be faster in my editing. Let me know in the comments what your tips are for me, if you have any. How do you speed through your editing of the podcast? Sweet. That's it for today. I will see you in the next video. Okay, bye.